Hey, what is up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you are doing well wherever you are in the world. Today, I want to talk to you about something that has dawned on me over the course of the last couple of months, and thinking about how so often we are in these places of trying to decipher and distill down everything that comes at us into something practical and palatable, and how we do that. And noticing, for lack of a better term, this experience that I've been having where I'm resonating with these ideas that I used to not necessarily, I don't want to say not necessarily understand or believe, but wasn't able to put them into a place that they could actively exist in my life. And so much of that is narrative based, right? The way that we think about the world, our perspective, the way that we allow our perspective to dictate ourselves in the world. I often say we are the stories that we tell ourselves. And in consideration of that, I was thinking about what are the stories that have changed the most for me, especially over the course of the last decade. And this time right now that we're living in, and thinking about the way that that narrative that I started changing years and years ago has set me up for success, so much of that was based on this idea that I had to reconstruct the way I thought about myself in the world. Which kind of leads me into today and what I want to talk to you about, and breaking down what I believe to be the 10 most significant tools in regard to not only self-talk, but actionable things that have happened in my life that have created impact and change for me. And so I want to talk about the 10 most significant tools in this trauma healing journey, at least to this point, that I've discovered that have had the greatest impact and change in my life. And so these aren't necessarily in a particular order. It's just more so me talking about these 10 things to help hopefully give you something that you can take away. And when I thought about this and I wrote the list, it turned into this really big blog, and I posted that blog and it got a ton of views. And I thought to myself, okay, this needs to be something that I talk about, that I can share with the world. And so here we are. If you don't know me, please like, follow, subscribe, share this, comment, tell a friend, let them know about Michael Unbroken, about Think Unbroken, about the podcast, about the YouTube, all of those things. At the end of the day, this is a community event, right? Everything about Think Unbroken is about community, about changing, because ultimately my goal is, if we can help heal 1 million people by exponential rates, then we can help heal the world. So do me a favor, please like, subscribe, share, all of those good things, especially if you find value in this. So starting, and again, in not any particular order, with number 1, no one is out to get me. This was a concept that took me a very long time to understand, because growing up, it felt like everyone was out to get me. It felt like the world was against me and everything that I did. Every time I tried to show up, every time I tried to arrive at a destination of the way that I wanted to live my life, it felt like there was always someone in my way. And I recognize now, looking back at that, that isn't necessarily the case. And especially now as an adult, it certainly isn't the case, because I have made a declaration to myself that no matter what, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to have the life that I want to have. And so when you think about that, what does that mean? What does it mean to think about the idea that someone may be out to get you? Well, one, that is very often a narrative that we have instilled in us from youth. And so it's very natural, and you come by it honestly, that you would be in this position where you would think that to be true. You can't argue that. And in fact, I understand it in a very intrinsic way. And as you move through this idea and understanding, what I want you to think about is, if it is true that people are out to get you, then how have you had any level or measure of success in your life? Now, of course, you may have heard me say this before, success is a self-defined narrative. I don't think that anyone can sit here and tell you what is or what is not success. But what I can tell you is that if you think that you are in positions where people are out to get you, you need to take a close look at your environment, and you might need to make some changes in your life, not only necessarily around the people that you are with, but the people that you allow in your life, because often we get trapped in these loops where suddenly you're noticing the same thing happening over and over and over again. And eventually the thing that I came to realize was that I am trapped in this loop of this understanding that people are out to get me, because I keep doing the same damn thing and allowing myself to continually be in that loop. So you may need to take a measurement of where you're at. And that was so much of my journey, looking at it and going, you know what, actually, no one's out to get me, but I don't think I'm necessarily showing up for myself completely. Number two, and again, these aren't in order, but if I were, number two is fitness is a factor in healing trauma. I come to this place in my life where I think that fitness is super important. And I ebb and flow with it like everyone. I'm certainly no Rich Roll or David Goggins. I don't run ultra marathons. You're not going to find me running, 500 miles a week. Not my thing. But I think about this idea and role of fitness that it plays in our life around healing and the power of removing ourselves from dissociation, that place where our brain and body is not connected. And looking at my journey at one point being 150 pounds overweight, totally removed from any sense of self, and thinking about how do I get healthy physically and mentally, and then recognizing the pattern that the physical changes in my body also impacted the mental and emotional changes that were happening in my body. And when you think about that and you measure it, what I want you to take into consideration is you have the ability to really in an incredible way, impact your mental health by creating a change in your physical well-being. Now, people like to go from couch to marathon in a week, and what always happens is you get hurt, you get injured, you get burned out. I found that in this journey for me, it was this slow, steady, just constant evolution of going a little bit harder every time that led me to this place where, I look at last summer before COVID, having a six-pack and being in the best shape of my life and thinking about that 10-year journey to get there, right? That is not something that happens overnight. And we put ourselves in this position where we want to get it done now. And fitness is so incredibly important in this. And it's not about a six-pack. It's not about having huge ripped muscles or anything like that. It's about how do you move your body? How do you get your brain realigned with your body and put yourself in a position of actually being present? And one of the best things that working on your physical fitness does is it makes you present. Because if I go and I look back at these moments of stepping into yoga studios, into gyms, into CrossFit studios, whatever that thing may have been at the time, so much of it was about my mental health and thinking about how do I push myself into a position to be more successful in life. Ultimately, that came from making choices and decisions around my physical health to force, and look, this is a hard place for a lot of people. Sometimes you have to force yourself into the position of making yourself healthy. I didn't get to 150 pounds overweight by magic, right? And so to get healthy, you have to do the opposite. Again, this is exactly like what I was talking about with loops. I continually was putting myself in a position of not being healthy because I allowed that to be my narrative. Number three, asking for help will set you up for success. This to me was probably the most important narrative that I had to shift around, because for so long I thought that asking for help was weak. Who doesn't? I mean, think about it. You've had this moment. Even listening to this right now, you're probably thinking, man, I feel kind of weak because I'm seeking something. That's not true. That is such a bullshit story and narrative that we share with ourselves that is fundamentally in our way. The best things that have ever been accomplished in life have been done through help, through asking for help. Look at anything great anyone has ever done in their life. Anything. And measure anyone. No one has achieved greatness on their own. It just doesn't work that way. We are a communal species. And this idea that asking for help is weak is fucking bullshit. I hate it. I think it is the worst narrative that is strewn within Western society. And in order for us to grow, to change, to heal, and to ultimately become the hero of our own story, is we have got to allow ourselves the space to ask for help. I mean, I remember, I guess it was 2015, I want to say. This guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, if you don't know him, hosts a entrepreneur podcast, really. It wasn't that at the time, but I remember creating this very terrifying video of me asking for help. Just the question was, how do I ask for help? Not recognizing the irony in asking for help and asking the question of how do you ask for help. And that became a very profound shift for me in the way that I think about everything in the world. Because, to come from a society that says to not ask for help and then to ask for help, you will find that people within your circles, within your community, strangers in the world will show up for you. And that is power that I cannot explain. And a feeling of, honestly, happiness and pride comes along with that place where you're willing to be uncomfortable. Number 4. Saying sorry is not a weakness. Again, this is very much within the narrative of asking for help. I never said sorry. I would never apologize. And part of this is dissociation. Part of this is growing up in a traumatic household where, you were constantly in a position of having to apologize for existing. And eventually I turned myself off from the idea that saying sorry was ever necessary. Good, bad, or indifferent, if I did the worst thing to you ever, or just something that was slightly dickish, for lack of a better term, I wouldn't apologize. And I found that is so weak-minded, because we do impact people. We do hurt people, sometimes intentionally because we are human beings and we make mistakes, sometimes on purpose and sometimes without intention. Either way, we impact people. And to not recognize our impact on people in the world is to not be present with ourselves. So much of personal growth and trauma healing and putting ourselves in a position to be successful is about having these conversations with apologies. To put ourselves in an uncomfortable place of saying, you know what? I acknowledge that I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. Leveraging I'm sorry, but then on the backside, actually creating change around that is so profoundly important to this healing journey that I argue that it might be number 1 on this list. Number 6, not all of my friends are my friends. I want to say that again. This is really important. Not all of my friends are my friends. There is something that happens as you are along in this journey when suddenly you recognize that the people in your life that you are spending time with are not supporting the person that you are becoming, the person that you are stepping into, the person that is crafting this new narrative around trauma healing and personal growth, and ultimately that place of becoming the hero of your own story. And when those people begin to show up in your life, you will notice, because they are going to fight you at every angle for you to go back to the person that you were. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that person. And so you'll find that these people that you think are your friends will turn out to not be, because you have to have support in this. And if your friends are pulling you down, you have to ask yourself the really important question of, are these actually my friends? Are these people that I want to be in connection with? Are these people that are going to help my life be better? It's hard. It's hard, especially, I look at relationships I've had with people for 10, 12, 15 years. And when I created change in my life and decided to step on this path of self-care, and then to exponentiate that, and then to move across the world and travel and do all these things in this healing journey, they would fall off, or they would question me, or they say, you're not doing this for the right reasons, or whatever that thing was. While I understood that my narrative was entirely about, how do I understand myself better? How do I grow? How do I become the person that I am today? And without that support, why am I going to have those people in my life, right? And so it's hard. That's something that you have to figure out on your own. For me, it was, a bunch of different milestones that appeared around not being supported, around conversations that we had, around, it is what it is. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, because we heal, we grow, we change. And I think about this, the people who are in our lives for a reason at the time that they are in our lives. And I value every real friendship and relationship that I've ever had, but that doesn't mean that they always have to be there. Number 7, when the going gets tough, cry. This one is fascinating to me because I spent 15 years as an emotional recluse and did not cry. Even on the day that I found my grandmother, that she had died, I had like 2 tears because that's how emotionally turned off I was. And that's an intense moment, right? Learning not to cry is instilled in us from youth. We are taught, and especially depending on where you come from, either A, boys don't cry, or if you cry, I'll hit you harder, or don't you dare cry, stop being a baby, pick yourself up, whatever that thing is, that gets so embedded in us that we learn to turn it off. No questions asked. The most uncomfortable thing that I've ever done in my life is learning to give myself the space to be uncomfortable enough to cry. That is so incredibly difficult that it took me a lifetime to figure out how to do. And now like this Adidas commercial comes on where the old guy's trying to break out of the nursing home and just so he can run, and I'm like weeping, right? And that's part of it. Like in life, it is okay to be an emotional human being, right? If we weren't meant to cry, we wouldn't have tear ducts. Like that's the truth. But getting that place where you can be vulnerable with yourself is incredibly difficult. And I'll be the first one to admit that that was one of the biggest struggles that I've had in the healing journey, because I constantly was fighting myself around this narrative of masculinity for one, but then also that embeddedness, that's not a word, of the idea of not being allowed to cry being embedded in me from youth. And so I had to reframe effectively the first 20 years of my life and step into this place where slowly but surely I built that up. And I found some things that worked for me too, like watching Good Will Hunting would push me into that, because I'd turn off the lights and be in a quiet, dark space by myself, and I'd watch this movie and then be so present with it that in certain key moments I would just be like, oh, this is what it's like to be an emotional human being. No one is around to judge me but me. Also, like not recognizing that no one gives a shit if you cry. That was powerful. And so what I want you to think about is like, how do you step into that? What does that look like in your life? What is the importance of crying and letting emotion exist? Because here's the thing about this that I don't know is talked about enough, is that if you want to feel any emotions, you have to be willing to feel the full range of emotions. And that can be very, very difficult. Number 8, reading is fundamental. I'm going to tell you this. I read an obscene amount of books every year because I want to constantly be learning. I want to be growing. I want to be educating myself. And there's no question that reading books and listening to podcasts and listening to audiobooks and reading blogs and educating myself, which is effectively what this is about, has been the cornerstone of this entire process. I mean, of course, there's the conferences and there's the coaching that I've had and my coach now even, and, going to therapy and group therapy and all the support groups and blah, 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 the list goes on. But nothing has been more impactful than reading, because I've been able to take these ideas and understandings that people who, I think if you're going to write a book, it probably makes you an expert to some extent in the subject matter. These people who are experts in this laying out something that I can consume. And then from that, pulling 1 to 2 pieces that I go, oh, I can apply this to my life and create change. And so reading is so much about how do you step into a new understanding with accepting that you're not going to be the smartest person in the room. And so that's what I think about. If I'm not the smartest person in the room, then that means that I get to learn. Number 9, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. You've heard this before. This line, this sentence, this quote, this thing is around the ether of humanity. It probably has been forever. And I believe that to be very true. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. This means showing up for yourself. And for so long, I didn't, because I was so scared of what people would think about me if I put my foot down and I said, this is who I am. This is who I am. And stepping into that idea, stepping into this notion that it is okay to be you and to be aligned with the things that you want and the person that you want to be is very difficult. But so incredibly important, because when you do that, you are actually taking control of your life. Think about all the moments in which you had a goal in mind, something that you moved towards, and how nothing around you would stop that. What was it about that was so impactful for you? It's because you had direction. There was something within you that said, this is who I am in this moment that I want to move towards. What we often lose out on is not creating that narrative at scale, meaning sitting down, taking assessment of what it is that we want our life to look like 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, and moving towards that every single day, no matter what. And so what I want you to think about is, how do you do that? How do you show up every single day and move towards something maybe greater than you, maybe bigger than you, but something that empowers you, something that makes you feel ironclad and steadfast in your decisions and choices that you make, and then put your boots on the ground and go, I'm going forward. Because when you are going forward, no boundaries, no obstacles, no objections are going to stop you from that. And I want you to think about what that looks like in life. And I'll give you my example. So the number one thing in my life that I move towards from a business perspective and a personal perspective is actually the same thing. How do I help 1 million people get out of the vortex and become the hero of their own story? Well, it starts with this. And people watching this or listening to this or reading the book or coming to a seminar or a course or doing coaching with me. And I think about the exponential rate growth of impact of helping one person who then shares it and shows a friend and then scale and so on and so forth. My goal is this 1 million idea, right? How do I help 1 million people create change in their life? Nothing is going to stop me from that, because I have decided that that is my life mission. And that number is arbitrary. It could be 7, it could be 800 million. It doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. The effort and the energy behind the number, that's what's important. And so I want you to think about, like, what is it that you really, really, truly want out of life? And then move towards that, no matter what. Because there's always going to be detractors. There's always going to be people who tell you can't. But only you can keep moving forward. And finally, number 10, maybe the most important, I don't really know. Again, this list wasn't made to be in any specific order. Number 10, the road is long. This journey, this process of healing, it's not going to end. Like, I don't want to be like the bearer of bad news, but instead, I want to give you the strength and acknowledgement of recognizing that this process, this healing journey, this thing that we're doing right now, this is going to be the rest of our lives. And I wish that it weren't. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be this thing that's always impacting you and always sitting on your shoulder and always like bearing down on you. It just means that these tools, these understandings, these personal growth journeys that you are on right now are just always going to be a part of you. If we are the sum total of all of our experiences leading up to this moment, then that means that in the future, that will continue to hold true. And so what I want you to think about is this idea of patience, which is, if you ask any of my coaching clients, the number one word that we talk about. Because this process and this journey is a long, arduous, difficult road that at the end is beautiful. And what's really incredible about this, and probably the biggest understanding that I've had over the course of the last, call it 3 years, is that as you are on this road and you are traversing everything that's coming at you and you hit these milestones and goals, the road isn't ended. You just plateau and you change lanes and then you go into the next. And that's forever, for the rest of our lives. And that's not a bad thing. That means that there's always opportunity to grow, to get better, to learn, to heal, to change, to impact, and to ultimately become the hero of your own story. My friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It truly means the world. If you found any value in this, please like, share, comment, rate, review, tell a friend. Also, check out thinkunbroken.com/free book. I'm actually giving away 1,000 copies of my book, Think Unbroken, on paperback. Just ask that you cover shipping and handling, and then I will send you an actual physical copy of my book. Check me out on social media at Michael Unbroken on all the platforms. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya.